This is the full commission of the Fall River Commission on Disability meeting on Thursday, February 14th, 2019. We'll begin with the reading of the open meeting law from Commissioner Robert Ray.
Do you have a copy? I gave the copy back over to you, Dennis. Sorry about that.
I apologize, folks.
It's okay.
I put it away thinking it was done for good.
Take your time.
Okay, I know where it is. I know where it is. There it is. There you are.
Thank you.
No.
Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible.
Thank you. Public input?
At this time, there was no one.
Okay. Roll call.
Commission Chairman Dennis Baselli,
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Debbie Pacheco,
Present.
Commissioner Lisa Silva,
Present.
Commissioner Kathy Ann Viveras,
Here.
Commissioner Sergeant Michael Hoare,
Here.
Commissioner Robert Ray,
Here.
Attorney Gary Howiak is absent.
Okay, next we have the approval of the full commission meeting for the meeting of January 10th, 2019.
Motion to approve the minutes of January 10th, 2019.
Second that?
Do I hear a second?
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The next is work group and subcommittee updates. I will start with the ADA. Lisa Silva, Robert Ray, and I attended a meeting of the work group of our ADA work group, and this was in January. I forgot the date. Oh my God! It was last Wednesday.
28, maybe? It was the end of the month.
At the end of the month? Very
Yes,
end
it
of the month,
was. It was the last Wednesday in January. 30th. This was really a good meeting. This was the BNC Durfee Construction Group. They were looking for variances. Does anybody want to help me with the variances or what they're looking for? Because I'm not.
The variances that we discussed at the work group meeting primarily focused on the handrail and the need to gain permission from the state with regards to where the placement of handrails were in the auditorium under construction, because the variance was that there would not be two, one on one side and one on the other side, because of the design nature of the auditorium. It made it not feasible. Okay. So, but what we needed to, what rather the architects wanted to be clear on was if the design as being presented was acceptable and workable for those with disabilities as well as the general public. And we were able to observe prints and we were able to discuss with the architects just what the variances were and see what the variances were being made. And we were able to bring a lot of good information out for this particular meeting for all involved. And we concluded that the variances did not really have any problems, or pose any problems. And so that was the main focus, if I remember correctly. There might have been some other minor similar issues throughout the building, but they were all revolved around.
Yeah. There was a very interesting discussion in the type of accommodations for hearing impaired, deaf and hard of hearing, which I found very fascinating, between Lisa's help assistance and Robert's assistance, and the different kinds of assistive living and assistive listening and hearing devices for classrooms that we went into. I also studied the variances that were being requested. They were sent to me as a Word document, and I will say that I did sign off on the approving the variance, supporting the variance. These variances are routinely granted all over the state of Massachusetts by the state's Architectural Access Board. But it was still important to have everybody look at it and see it, and for me to to read it over. So they were signed off on. And that was a very, very, actually a very informative meeting.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Was it?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Will the ADA group continue to be involved in that process with them? Are they looking for you
Well, they
to?
actually, I was really excited to be a part of that meeting. I thought the architects loved the feedback that they provided, that we provided them, especially in regard to assistive listening technology. I guess many of the classrooms are going to have sound systems. So
Oh,
I
nice.
started thinking about how those sound systems could tap into children that have hearing loss, because many of them use assistive technology to hear, and then maybe it would be one less thing that they have to put in their ear. And they were very responsive. They got on their phones, they were looking at things so that they could get equipment that was
exciting.
compatible. We also talked about the auditoriums and how a blind individual would be able to find their seating, because there wouldn't be any braille on the aisles where the armrests were.
Oh, okay.
And they were like, oh, well, we don't even think the seating is actually numbered. And I'm like, yeah, it is, because many of the auditoriums are used for dance recitals. And I know that my daughter uses, her dance school uses one of the school's auditoriums, and we do have assigned seating, and they never thought about that. So it was just a great meeting, a lot of brainstorming. They were just really, really responsive and interested in what we had to say. And they actually invited us to go back when the school was near completion to just tweak out a few things and take a look at it. So it was exciting to be a part of. I was excited anyway.
It sounds great. Thank you.
Well, they were excited too, because they don't get to have that kind of interaction with other groups when there's construction like that. So to be actually interacting with groups that are going to be day-to-day using and maneuvering around buildings and using systems in the classrooms and getting their way around the buildings, that kind of input was very important. So we have been assured that there will be further input from the ADA work group.
Thank you. I really appreciate you guys working with them on that. That's awesome.
Policies, Vice Chair?
I have no updates at this time.
Okay, under finance, first, I need a motion to approve the renewal of the disability parking enforcement program for another year. At this, I should say,
I would make-
at the same total as we have been doing it. Yeah.
Okay.
I would make that motion, Mr. Chairman, that the commission continue to provide financial support to the police officers who are generating our handicapped parking tickets and enforcement.
Do you know what our?
Do I?
our-
Oh my God.
Do we need to, hold on, Dennis, I'm sorry. What our amount is, do we need to have that in the minutes that we currently,
We can
do you
get
know?
that. I think it's,
Sergeant?
I only know ballpark.
Okay.
I think we could get the exact figure to put in the minutes. So if you want to say, with the exact figure being the same as current and being printed in the minutes or something like that,
Okay.
Certainly. So,
that would be fine.
yeah, I would amend the motion then to say that the support for the Disability Parking Enforcement Police Detail Program continue at the same amount as the fiscal 2019 budget.
that's good.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next is the purchasing of the disability parking enforcement tickets. I think we said there was a ballpark figure of 2,500. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So I need that motion on the floor. Somebody to make that motion.
I would make the motion that that the commission provide up to $2,500 for the purchase of parking tickets for the parking enforcement program.
Okay. Do I hear a second to that motion?
I will second that motion.
Okay. Discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Aye.
Okay. All right, so that's two opposes, okay.
Who's the second?
Next is outreach.
Sergeant Hall and Lisa. Okay.
I don't think we have any
No
outreach
new
reports for this
updates.
month. Okay. We reported last month that the date's been set for next year's Disability Awareness Day. Otherwise, the outreach will be working on other things, and we'll be reporting back next month. Okay, old business. I would like to take this opportunity under old business to kind of straighten out the back and forth emails on Bay Coast Bank and the accessible trolley. So let me first begin by thanking Commissioner Ray for expressing concerns and being concerned about making sure that the communication was proper. And if you don't mind, I'd like to turn it over to you just so that I'm not misrepresenting what your concern was, and then I can explain things.
Okay. I had received emails from Dennis talking about it was the most recent email that we had received from Bay Coast. Informing Chairman Marcelli about their rejection at this time. And I was concerned just about how it read from the very first line, because I, being new to the commission, have not really been able to catch up with all the information as it started before I joined the commission. But I noticed right in the opening sentence how Ms. Novo, if I remember correctly, Carolyn Novo, the representative who emailed Mr. Pacelli, the way she worded it was that she was rejected, or rather the individual who had decided on the funding proposal had rejected it and had worded it as your proposal, as if Mr. Pacelli was the one making the request for the funds for the trolley. Whereas my understanding at that point in time was that this is actually a project of the Creative Arts Network, and we as a commission are not actually the ones developing or organizing this effort. They came to the commission, and that was my understanding. And so I just wanted to have understood that this is not our project, because this is not the purpose of the commission. Is to, perhaps, granted, we might start some projects sometimes, but in this particular instance, the way I understood and the way it was perceived, and the way I've seen this go on since I started here, and it's just the kind of thing that should have been clarified pretty quickly, I thought, within a couple months rather. Now we're getting on for a few months, and especially if there's a large sale like this hanging over. Who really needs to be waiting around for a large sale such as this trolley? And so I expressed to Dennis my concerns, and I wasn't realizing that I probably should have just directed it just to him and so what exactly is going on. But language being my issue as it is as a hard of hearing person, I take things almost literally. I know better than to, but how we word things is how they're understood. And so I addressed the issue to him, as well as just my concern that what little documentation I had seen up until that point last week regarding the financing of it, it looked very weak to me. And had I originally been part of the commission when this was brought up and been able to follow it all along, I would have asked questions about the financing to help clarify it, not pro or con against the proposal or the request, but to help streamline it for everyone's purpose. And so at that point in time, as I said, when I wrote my email to Chairman Pacelli, I was just concerned. It was weak. I don't see how it would ever get past a bank request. Because that was my own opinion from my own experience, if you will. And so I addressed those concerns to Chairman Pacelli. And also there was just the issue where I brought up, generally, sometimes it proves difficult to follow through the communications. And that's not unusual. That's just a part of digital communication, and there's ways around that, but at first everyone needs to be made aware of it and be able to come on board and figure out how exactly to conduct digital communication so that it's always clear and known who's emailing who's saying what when, so that we can follow sequence events and see who might perhaps be making an error in their communication. And in this case, my concern was the errors being made on the part of a group that wants this project done, understandably, and perhaps is being conveyed in a way to try and gain strength for the proposal, which is understandable, but at the same time, we need to be careful how we do that. And does that sound about right to you, Jim? Sully?
I don't want to, I will only say that I can't control what people choose to write in their email. The first time I had heard from Bay Coast Bank after I reached out after the November 8th meeting, I did reach out to them saying we'd be willing to go with Creative Arts Network and communicate with the Board of Directors, explain why we think it would be nice to support the funding of an accessible trolley. But I made it clear to them that this was a Creative Arts Network proposal. And what I did was, when I reached out to them, I provided them as an attached document the actual proposal from Creative Arts Network, which specifically does spell out that this is a proposal to the commission by the Creative Arts Network. Like I said, I don't want to be responsible for how people word their emails, but I, you know, in no way, for myself, I did not imply that the Disability Commission was going to purchase the trolley or whatever, but that we were supporting and we would be willing to help the Creative Arts Network. I did hear, and that was the first time I heard back from Bay Coast Bank was the rejection. I hadn't heard anything in response to minutes that I provided them upon their request or the documents that I provided for them upon their request. So that was the first time I heard. And I wrote a thank you note, as I always do, thanking them for considering us. And I did say that it would have been nice if we had some co-sponsorship on this trolley, but I understand the various concerns that you need to be concerned about. And I hope someday, you know, you might want to reconsider or something like that. And I heard back that from Dave Dennis that they are reconsidering. So I don't know.
There was another email and it's hard to find.
Yeah,
It is.
they are reconsidering, but I'm pretty much going to leave this between Dave and the bank. That's really how I'm going to leave this. And from this time on, it's really going to be the Creative Arts Network to do their own outreach.
Yeah.
If they want our help, it's going to be their responsibility to come and ask for it. Does that sound like a good plan of action?
Absolutely. So the only other correspondence that we have was that last, which was hard to follow, is that Dave Dennis did reach out and sent us an email that the bank is reconsidering it. That's the last of the correspondence.
Exactly.
And that they didn't get anything else from us.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think Commissioner Robert Ray was right to point out the language, and so maybe, you know, this is also a lesson for me to make sure. But I figured having an attached document, you know, with the appropriate titles and stuff like that was all I had to do. But
Yeah,
that's okay, you know,
I think so.
live and learn.
No, that was good.
Is there any further discussion on this, or is everybody okay with?
No, I agree with your proposed actions. I do. It would be best to, really, I was looking for clarification, first for myself, secondly for the group, and thirdly, to be projected and brought out everywhere else, because as I read it, and by extension being a member of the commission with Chairman Pacelli, I felt a presumed responsibility
Yeah.
for the purchase, as if, well, we're the ones. Now, if we as a commission were actively engaged in pursuing something, well, that's fine, and we would make it clear. But in this case, my perception was, oh, hang on, I thought this was this group's, and not ours, but now this is being made clear, and this is how it should proceed from here. So that was the essence of my concern, was where does real responsibility fall on this?
And if I could just add to that as well, originally, when the presentation was made to us, and I don't believe you were at that initial meeting, Commissioner
Probably
Ray.
not, no.
Again, the expectation from Creative Art Network was that we would pay the entire cost of the trolley. The group felt that perhaps we would do a match, that we could match private donations that came in, and understanding that people, you've been able to catch that. But I just wanted to reinforce again the point, and I know I've said it previously, but as a commission, I was very pleased that Chairman Porcelli took the initiative to reach out to Bay Coast Bank. This was not something that originally Creative Art Network was inclined to want to do.
Yes.
And while we didn't get the initial response we hoped, they are reconsidering, and I think we all recognize that you need to ask, you need to make an effort, and to the extent that maybe it won't be this particular sponsor, but maybe there'll be someone else who'll step forward. But I do believe that Chairman Porcelli has really managed to keep this project alive, because when it was presented to us initially, and then when we made our vote, there was a sense that it was not going to move forward at that time, but he managed to keep it alive and keep the promise a possibility. So I just want to be clear, and I think that was his involvement, was simply to add his support, and I think he did so very effectively. So thank you.
I heard you hear something.
And the only thing I would add to that is the case that I'm trying to make. I know, why are we making a big deal over a trolley? But the case I'm trying to make is access to programs and activities and entertainment, the same as people without disabilities would have access to. So, you know, if it seems like I'm making a big deal out of a trolley, I guess I'm looking at it as a bigger principle than just, you know, a vehicle. Okay, is there any other, anything else under old business? How about new business? Any new business?
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
So just by way of update, and I know someone from facilities has just arrived, but the city is in the process of working on feasibility study for handicapped accessibility issues. So we are moving ahead, and we're excited that that feasibility study may in fact give us an opportunity to actually get construction funding to do some ADA work. So we just want the commission to know that we, as a city and as a government, take our ADA compliance responsibilities very seriously, and we are moving ahead with that, and appreciate the chairman's support with that, and we're hoping for a successful first step.
She doesn't need to address the commission. No,
Okay.
I just wasn't sure. So,
Does anybody want to speak in this?
no,
Okay.
well, also there's no one else that needs
Oh,
to
all right.
address us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Viveris. Anything else under new business? Okay, I will entertain a moment. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
All right, I make a motion to adjourn.
Wow, I made this in time.
Second?
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
Okay.
You could have seconded the motion to adjourn.